What would you do if you were cast out of a place you own, simply because of the color of your skin? On Tuesday afternoon, at exactly 2:47 p.m., light from the crystal chandeliers cascaded over the Italian marble floor of the Astoria lounge, bathing the luxurious space in a soft ivory glow. Julian Devereux entered the lobby with the calm presence of a man well accustomed to the weight of rooms, thick with power. His navy suit was tailored to perfection, hugging his frame with elegant precision, and each step echoed steadily across the marble like a silent declaration of unwavering confidence. He wore no membership pin, was not flanked by assistants or security, yet carried an aura that demanded attention or caution. Behind the reception desk, Melissa Grant, with 8 years of experience in elite hospitality, looked up the moment she heard the first footstep. She had learned to read people within seconds, and her instinct told her that this man did not belong. No designer overcoat, no familiar rapport with the staff, and most importantly, no visible signs of established membership. Her face stretched into a polite, practiced smile, the kind trained to say, "I don't trust you," while keeping its professional composure. "Excuse me, sir. May I help you? The delivery entrance is to your right." Julian stopped, locking eyes with her. Calm, respectful, yet unmistakably firm. "I have a reservation. Meeting room 7, under the name Devereux." No anger, no boasting, just a statement, spoken as if his name were already etched in the marble behind her. Melissa frowned slightly, typed quickly on her screen, then paused, her eyes narrowing. "This name says M. Devereux. Clearly a mistake." Julian nodded once. "No mistake. Julian Devereux. I made the reservation yesterday." Melissa's smile tightened. "We don't accept walk-ins. Members must reserve weeks in advance." Her voice rose just enough for a few heads to turn. In a small corner near the tea table, a woman wearing a pearl necklace lifted her phone and began recording. A red dot appeared. She was live. On her screen, a caption appeared in real time. "This black man is being denied entry at Astoria Lounge. Is he a member?" Melissa repeated her question, this time with a sharper tone. "Mr. Devereux, are you a member?" Julian maintained his composure. "I have a reservation. And I need to see your membership card," she said, her hand sliding quietly toward the alarm button beneath the desk. Julian reached into his jacket, the light from his watch glinting under the chandeliers. A Corniche heritage valued at over $150,000, a subtle but unmistakable symbol of true elite status. "I don't have the card on me," he said, "but the reservation should suffice." Melissa's smile twisted. "Here, a reservation alone isn't enough. We have procedures." In the corner, the woman live, streaming, leaned forward, her phone lens trained on them, and the viewer count jumped from 20 to 50 in seconds. One comment flashed on screen. "This is blatant racism." Julian pulled out his wallet. A first-class boarding pass from JFK to Tokyo peeked from the inner pocket, alongside a gleaming black American Express Centurion card, the pinnacle symbol of financial stature. "Would you mind calling up to confirm the booking?" he asked gently. But Melissa no longer seemed to hear. Her hand was already on the call button. From the hallway on the left, a man emerged in a sleek black uniform with a radio at his belt. Tony Delgado, head of security, with more than 2 decades of experience. But today, his instincts would be tested in a way he had never encountered in 23 years of service. And right there, beneath chandeliers and gilded frames, a confrontation of power, prejudice, and dignity was about to unfold, with Julian at the eye of the storm. The air in the lounge seemed to tighten slowly, as if someone had turned down the volume of every sound by half. Tony Delgado walked over with the quiet stride of someone, well, practiced in extinguishing trouble. He stopped beside the front desk, eyes scanning quickly from Melissa to Julian. "What's going on?" he asked, curt but not rude. Melissa stepped forward immediately. "This man insists on entering a private meeting room without a membership card. He refuses to leave." Tony looked Julian over carefully. Standing in front of him was not a typical agitator. No panic, no shouting, no signs of aggression. Just a man, composed, well-dressed, and far too self-possessed. "I have a reservation. Meeting room 7, Julian repeated, more softly this time, as if offering Tony one final chance to resolve this wisely. Tony nodded silently, hand brushing his radio. "Wait here," he said, turning just as the elevator doors opened with a sharp chime, and heels tapped crisply across the marble. Claire Simmons, general manager of the Astoria Lounge, emerged with the air of someone ready for a press briefing. "Melissa, what's going on?" Melissa quickly recapped the situation, lacing her words with phrases like member privacy, non-compliance, refusal to provide credentials. Claire, a sharp 40, something who had managed 5-star hotels and million-dollar galas, looked at Julian with an expression of polite caution. "Sir, could you state your name again?" "Julian Devereaux," he replied. "I booked meeting room 7 at 3 p.m. with Mr. Kaito Tanaka." A flicker of hesitation crossed Claire's eyes as she checked the booking system. "Monsieur Devereaux? Yes, it's listed. But per policy, we require membership verification." Julian gently placed 2 fingers on the marble counter, his gaze calm and steady. "As I've explained, I'm not carrying the card. But all details of the appointment are accurate." Claire leaned in, about to respond, when Melissa cut in sharply. "We can't make exceptions. What if he just knows the name of a real member and is impersonating him?" The remark was like throwing fuel on a fire. On Savannah's phone screen, the woman live streaming nearby. The viewer count had surpassed 120. Comments flooded in. "Blatant racism. Get this man a lawyer. What is Astoria doing?" One viewer even recognized the location and typed, "That's the Astoria Lounge on Madison Avenue. I've been there. This place has issues." Tony turned back. "I ask everyone to remain calm. Mr. Devereaux, if you do not have your card, I'll need to ask you to step outside until we can verify your status." "In 16 minutes, Mr. Tanaka will arrive," Julian said, his voice still level. "And when he sees his business partner being treated like an intruder, I doubt our agreement will survive it." At that moment, all background noise seemed to vanish. A staff member from the kitchen peeked through the swinging door, then quietly closed it. At the bar, 3 members had stopped sipping their drinks, now watching like an audience caught in the climax of a drama. Claire folded her arms, face tense. "You have to understand. This is about protocol." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Does protocol allow 3 guards to surround a man simply because he isn't recognized?" Just then, a chime rang from Melissa's computer, an incoming email, Subject line, urgent. But she didn't have time to read it, because once again, Julian reached into his jacket. And this time, everyone held their breath. Julian's hand slowly pulled out a business card. Not a membership card, not an ID, just a small ivory slip of paper with precisely cut edges and silver, embossed lettering that shimmered beneath the crystal chandelier above. Julian Devereux, Chief Executive Officer. Devereux Hospitality Group. In an instant, the entire lounge froze. Melissa stood motionless, her eyes locked onto the name before she instinctively stepped back in a gesture of awkward retreat. Claire reached for the card, her hand slightly trembling, unable to hide the panic in her expression. She read the name once, twice again, as if trying to make sense of a cruel joke, but each letter rang clear like a full stop to every suspicion. Julian had no need to say another word. The card spoke for him. Claire swallowed hard, struggling to keep her voice steady. "You are?" "I am," Julian replied firmly, his eyes never leaving hers. From a corner of the room, Edward Halbrook, the longest-standing member of Astoria Lounge with over 3 decades of loyalty, stepped out from his chair. He adjusted his tie, walked over to the front desk, and looked straight at Claire, then at Melissa. "I've been here since the beginning," he said, his voice gravelly but firm, "and I've seen everything. This man was doubted and treated with disrespect in the very hall he owns. How do you plan to explain that?" No one answered. Tony, the head of security, lowered his head in silence, his gaze avoiding everyone's. He had handled hundreds of emergencies in his career, but never stood in the middle of a misstep this profound. On Savannah's phone, the woman live streaming, the viewer count had passed 400. Comments poured in. "What is going on? Plot twist no one saw coming. Astoria just imploded." One viewer even typed, "Send this to CNN now." Amid the chaos, Julian remained composed. He didn't shout, didn't accuse, didn't lash out. He simply placed the business card on the counter like a verdict that needed no trial. "Now," he said softly, yet his voice echoed like a bell of reckoning. "How will your procedures handle this situation?" Claire had no reply. Melissa kept her head down, both hands clenched tightly beneath the desk. The business card lay between them like a deep cut through the layers of arrogance and complacency built over the years. No one dared to touch it again. And no one could deny that from that moment forward, the balance of power in the lounge had shifted forever. The tension in the Grand Lounge hadn't yet dissipated when Julian's phone gently buzzed. He pulled it out, swiped the screen, then glanced at his watch. "Kaito Tanaka, my associate, is arriving early. He'll be here in 6 minutes," he said, without raising his voice. The words fell into the silence like an arrow piercing the fragile shell of Claire's composure. Melissa had already withdrawn to the back, her lips pressed tight. Julian placed his phone gently on the counter and turned the screen toward them. A short message glowed on the display. "Landing ahead of schedule. Arriving in 6 minutes." No further explanation was needed. With that single line, he had placed the entire reputation of the lounge on the line, under the watchful eyes of hundreds, witnessing the moment online. Before Claire could respond, another chime echoed from Melissa's computer. She leaned over, and her eyes widened in shock. Her face went pale. On the screen was an internal email flagged, "Urgent. Verify executive. Level personnel." She leaned toward Claire and whispered something that made Claire instantly step back and pull out her phone. "I need to report this to the board immediately," she said, backing away toward the elevator without waiting for a reply. As the metal doors closed behind her, Julian remained where he stood, steady and immovable like a monument in the storm of prejudice that had just swept through. Tony Delgado stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "I apologize, Mr. Devereaux. I did not handle this properly." Julian nodded. He wasn't angry, nor did he offer forgiveness. That wasn't why he came. From the kitchen, a few staff members peeked out. They were no longer whispering. Instead, there was a quiet respect, the kind that rises when people realize they are witnessing something greater than themselves. At that moment, Savannah, still live streaming, slowly changed the video title. "CEO discriminated against in his own property." And here's the result. The view count surged past 800 in minutes, with hundreds of comments pouring in every second. One viewer recognized Julian and typed quickly, "That's the man behind the Le Havre Hotel's acquisition. My God, they have no idea who they're messing with." Inside the lounge, anxiety was no longer an individual feeling. It had become a shared, collective dread. They were no longer facing a guest without a membership card. They were facing a CEO with both a vast network of influence and the full weight of public attention. And just then, the glass doors al-Suhul slid open, revealing the measured steps of an Asian man in a finely tailored suit, followed closely by two assistants carrying briefcases. It was none other than Kaito Tanaka. Julian stepped forward with ease, smiled, and said, "Welcome to Astoria Lounge." Every eye turned toward them, and everyone understood. This moment was no longer about the internal affairs of an exclusive club. This was the beginning of a systemic reckoning. Julian led Kaito Tanaka and his two assistants straight toward the elevator, without needing any directions, as if he had done it 100 times before. When the doors closed behind them, the entire lounge fell into a suffocating silence. Inside Meeting Room 7, with its glass walls overlooking Central Park and a long walnut table built for 12, only 2 men sat across from each other. Julian poured tea for his guest, his voice deep and calm. "Earl Grey, I remember you once said you didn't care for coffee." Kaito smiled, accepting the cup with both hands. "Good memory. But I think today we have more pressing matters to discuss." Julian nodded slightly, opened his laptop, and cast 2 screens onto the large monitor. One was the lobby's security camera footage. The other was Savannah's live stream, still being shared even though it had ended. 3,200 people watched that unfold live, he said, and that number is still climbing. Kaito watched the recording closely, saying nothing for nearly 2 full minutes. When the video ended, he looked up, unable to hide his disappointment. "It seems many here are not yet ready for the values my company upholds." Julian replied without hesitation, "That's exactly why we must start from here." He laid out the entire reform plan, from bias, awareness training and AI oversight to anonymous reporting policies and zero tolerance for violations. "And I'd like to add one more clause to the merger agreement," he said, his tone resolute. "An annual requirement for transparency in diversity metrics and social responsibility." Kaito remained silent for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed. But I also want us to create a scholarship for hospitality students from underrepresented communities. Would you be willing to join me?" Julian smiled. More than willing. And as the two men shook hands, it wasn't just a $340 million deal being sealed, but a shared commitment to rebuilding the service industry on compassion, inclusion, and accountability that cannot be avoided. As soon as the meeting ended, Julian was invited to the boardroom to report the incident to the executive committee. 6 members were already seated around the long wooden table, their eyes filled with concern and skepticism. In their hands were printed headlines rapidly spreading across social media, with one line standing out: "Black CEO faces discrimination in his own property and strikes back to shake the entire system." Without waiting for a prompt, Julian began presenting concrete facts. He listed 23 complaints against the receptionist Melissa over the past 18 months, along with a 12% drop in membership and over $2 million in lost revenue, all linked to poor service and an atmosphere of exclusion. "This isn't an isolated incident," Julian stated, his eyes scanning the room. "This is the consequence of a culture that quietly enables bias." One board member, David Trask, gently objected. "Your handling of this might be seen as too severe." But before Julian could respond, Kaito Tanaka, invited to attend as a witness to the event, spoke up. "I witnessed Mr. Devereaux face discrimination without losing control. That composure reflects true leadership. It's precisely why I've decided to move forward with our partnership." The room quieted. Julian continued, "I'm not here to assign blame. I'm here to take action." He laid out the reform plan: recurring unconscious bias training, AI monitoring to detect discriminatory behavior, an anonymous reporting channel that feeds directly to the CEO's office, and most notably, a zero-tolerance disciplinary system for violators. "We may not be able to control every conversation," he affirmed, "but we can control the cultural standard we allow to persist." After a tense round of discussion, the board unanimously approved the proposal. Victoria Hale, the board chairwoman, stood and said firmly, "You have full authority to implement this. Make sure it never happens again." At that moment, Julian's assistant Jennifer entered the room with her phone in hand. "We've just received over 200 new membership applications in the past hour," she announced. "Most of them are from multicultural business leaders." The room fell silent. "People don't leave because of a scandal," Julian said calmly. "They just need to see that we're willing to change." And in that moment, everyone understood. They weren't just repairing a mistake. They were rewriting the foundation for a more just future in the world of elite hospitality. Within just 3 months of the incident, Astoria Lounge had transformed into something entirely new. Once a space quietly ruled by unspoken codes of appearance, power, and pedigree, it had become a symbol of inclusion and refinement in the world of luxury service. The portraits in the hallway no longer displayed white founders in century-old tuxedos. Instead, they were replaced with authentic photographs of multiracial, multi-generational guests smiling brightly at community events hosted by the club. A new bronze plaque was mounted just behind the front desk, engraved in gold letters. "Dignity without distinction, service without condition. Astoria Lounge is committed to welcoming everyone with equal respect." David Park, who replaced the former head of reception, successfully implemented a behavior monitoring AI system that not only detects and addresses signs of discrimination, but also provides real-time feedback to guests through an integrated smart interface. As a result, customer satisfaction surged by 47%, while complaint rates dropped to near zero. Internal surveys showed that the percentage of employees who felt safe to speak up increased by more than 60%. In the media spotlight, Julian did not use public attention to defend or blame, but instead launched a broader conversation about service culture and dignity in business. His interview on The Today Show garnered over 12 million views within 48 hours, with one quote in particular being shared hundreds of thousands of times as an inspirational message. Composure is not weakness. It is the kind of strength that compels others to listen. The momentum didn't stop there. The Tanaka Devereux Scholarship for hospitality students from underrepresented communities was established, supporting more than 120 students in its first year. These scholars studied at top institutions, interned directly within the Devereux Group hotel network, and most were retained as full-time staff after graduation. Another touching transformation unfolded in the club's own kitchen. Roberto, the Mexican executive chef who had witnessed the events that day, was promoted to Director of Culinary Arts. He assembled a team of chefs and sous, chefs from over 30 countries, creating a multicultural menu featuring Lebanese-style lemon tart, delicately spiced Japanese curry, and traditional tamales based on his mother's recipe. Food and Wine magazine dedicated a cover story to what it called Astoria Lounge's brave and timely reinvention. Julian still visited from time to time, standing quietly in the lobby, observing staff engaging with guests, listening to greetings exchanged, and noticing eyes that were no longer wary but open and welcoming. He didn't need to say anything, because true change does not have to be shouted. It lives in the smallest gestures, repeated daily without showmanship, yet powerful enough to reshape an entire industry. Julian Devereux's story is not just about a case of discrimination. It is a wake-up call about how we respond to power when it is not printed on a business card or reflected in skin color. A true leader does not need to raise their voice. They let their actions and decency speak for them. And when dignity is upheld in the face of adversity, it has the power to transform an entire system. What began with a single look of prejudice ended in a sweeping reform, not only at Astoria Lounge, but across the entire industry. If you believe that dignity and fairness are values worth protecting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so we can continue sharing more powerful and inspiring stories. And leave a comment with the phrase, "No bias," if you resonate with the journey Julian walked. Because sometimes, one right action taken at the right moment can change not just one person's life, but the culture of an entire community.